Well, we're more mobile now, right? People move, I mean, people when they're gonna entertain themselves, they'll go out to Boardman or out to Beaver or
Yeah.
those kinds of things.
Well, that's what Candy said, is she was a student here, but then went to Kent campus to finish her, take more classes, and she said that she would come back here on weekends, or a lot of people would go out there on weekends. She'd come back here on weekends because this was the happening place. Like, wow, it's, you know,
Yeah.
says a lot, but I mean,
I wish I would've made it last week. I just had so much, it's just a busy time of the term.
oh, it is, this semester's, this is the time.
Should I go ahead and start?
If you want, yeah, you want me to introduce you, or you can go ahead and do it if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Good, well,
You guys, I know a couple of you got evaluation forms. As I mentioned, those are not to evaluate Dr. Rose, they're evaluate the whole speaker series. So if you take a moment, fill those out anonymously, you just leave them on the table. This is our second to last speaker in the speaker series. Dr. Rose is going to give a very interesting talk, and I'm very curious about the topic, so I'm going to sit back and enjoy it. But my pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Lizzie Rose.
thank you, Chuck.
I've been studying time for a little bit, probably about, I don't know, 25 years, because I never have enough time. And as you guys know, it seems there's less and less time. In reality, when we start talking about time, let's see if I can get this going, we think of it as a finite resource for the most part. There's 24 hours in a day, we can break it out into minutes, we can even break it down into seconds. We try to measure it, we'll measure it in terms of years, months, weeks, days, hours, all the way down to seconds. Some people will even go further than that. I like this little saying, we all have the same 24 hours as Beyonce. If you don't know Beyonce, she's a performer, singer, actress, and she's only 35 years old. She's just done a phenomenal amount of stuff, and she constantly does things. And I think when this quote came out, it was around 2007, 2008. She was on a world tour. She hit almost every continent. She put on like 95 different concerts, and in that time still wrote songs and still did other kinds of things. And people were just wowed by what she did. And this quote came out kind of like this idea that you can do what she does. She's got the same 24 hours that we do. Of course, you know, if I try to sing, you guys will all run away. Because singing and having that talent is something different. And that's, being a sociologist, I really started to think about this idea of time and how I don't have the same time that Beyonce has. I have different time. And so I started thinking about it, and you'll see quotes that will situate time as an economy, right? So if we think of time like money, you'll see these kinds of quotes. Every day is a bank account, and time is our currency. No one is rich, no one is poor. We've got 24 hours each. And something just always hit me wrong about this quote. It's like, no, I don't feel like I have the same amount of time as other people. I do accomplish a lot, and I accomplish a phenomenal amount, and I used to accomplish a lot more because I only needed like 4 hours of sleep. But now I need like 10, I don't know what happened. And a nap in between sometimes. And so I think when I think about who has the amount of time, it's like if I'm only sleeping 4 hours, I get a lot more done than someone who has to sleep 10 hours. And so there's something in there where time, you know, yeah, we all have the same amount of this 24 hours, but how much control do we have over that time? And that's really where I started to look at things. On an individual level, personal time and our personal choices that we make affect our time. And so you'll see quotes like this all the time. We have the same 24 hours, it's how you manage your time. Yesterday I was going to go to a presentation on time management for associate professors so that you can, within the time frame, move to the next level, and I didn't have the time to go. I was planning to go, I was dressed, and then something came up, and next thing I know, that it was impossible because it's a 30-minute trip to my house to the campus, find parking, get to where it needs to be. Wasn't going to happen. Of course, you know, managing your time is something we hear all the time, and we hear it probably more so today than we've heard it in the past. You'll see quotes like this: we all have the same 24 hours a day. Own your results. That means take control of your time. And to some extent, we can, right? As a sociologist, I think of time as a resource. It's something that we have access to. But because it's a resource, it's also, there's an element of control in society that dominates how we measure the time, how we distribute the time, how we judge how people use their time. There's a lot that's going on with just, controlling aspects of time in society. We have this economic distribution with money that we can all understand, and time can be thought of as the same thing. If we think of the two big things when you want to accomplish something, there's two things you need: time and money. All right? So, yeah, you can have the money, but do you have the time to do it? Right? That's always been my thing. When I have money, I have no time to do things. And when I have all the time in the world, I have no money to do it. Right? So you're kind of stuck between those two things. Well, economic distribution is mainly I keep thinking there's a pointer here.
There is, but it's really hard to get it to work.
Okay. So when we think of economic distribution, we have minimum wages. That means we have some controls on how much you're supposed to pay someone, right? We have salary steps. So if you get a job, and you want to make more money, you got to make a salary step up to a different range. And so we have these salary ranges. They're pretty much predetermined in a structure that we can't control. So if you take a job, where you start at in that job is really important, right? So if you negotiate and you get into a higher step than what you wanted to do, I went to a conference this past summer in Seattle, and it was all about activism and looking at the fight for 15, which is the fight for a minimum wage of $15 an hour. And my sister was in the middle of negotiations of getting a job. She's like, I'm gonna fight for it. It's a little job. She's a stay-at-home mom, and she was gonna work in the schools as a teacher's aide, and she thought that would be really fun. And she wasn't thinking about doing it in terms of money, but it was still a job and money. And when she got done with that conference, she said, I'm gonna fight for that 15, right? And so I said, yeah, you do it. And then she got $14.95. They just couldn't do it because it would put her into a whole different step, right? And that job didn't allow you if she went to that 15, she couldn't be a teacher's aide. She would have to be a teacher and then be in a whole different kind of category, or an administrator of some sort. So it was like this element that prohibited her from making that minimum. So if we try to set the same thing with time, and we look at that, we have set times. Some of our jobs, you have to be in your job at a certain time. You have to clock in, and you can't leave until the time left. We call them clock watchers. I was one of those. One of my first jobs was a clock watcher job. I worked in an airport. That door that says personnel only. Well, they had these offices up above, and we worked in an office. We were paper pushers at that time. We created paper and sent it off in mails and things like that. But our boss wasn't in the office. We were in the airport up on the second floor. You could see the tarmac and things like that. The boss would randomly call us at 4:58, 4:59, right, just to ask us a quick question. So we would be standing at the door, all with our purse and our packages and everything, just waiting for the clock to click at 5 o'clock. Even though we had finished for the day, we had cleaned up, the only person who was gonna call was gonna be the boss, making sure that we didn't leave until 5 o'clock. So we had no control over our own time. And we see that with a lot of jobs today, that it's not just jobs, but a lot of things operate that way. School, classes, right? If you're in class at a certain time. If you miss it, you miss it. There's also something else that's going on, is this term precariousness, where you never know what the set times are, that keeps you in limbo. So what is your schedule going to be? And we see this happening today with jobs where you'll have a set time for the week, but you don't know next week what your hours are going to be. So you can't plan ahead. And we know that economically, if you want to increase your social standing, your economic standing, that planning is really important. Planning in terms of where you spend your time. But you can't do that if you're in a position where there's precariousness, where you don't know where your time is going to be spent. You don't know, like for students, how long is it going to take me to write this paper, right? Ideally, it should take you maybe a couple hours. But if you're sitting there and spending 2 hours staring at a blank screen, right, that time is gone. It doesn't come back. That's hard. Right? If you're in the job and you want to plan for, you know, a new job, and you want to go on a job interview, but you don't know if you're going to get the job or not, and they say it's going to be tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and then your boss calls you and says, we need you tomorrow at 3 o'clock, right? Now all of a sudden it's like that anxiety and stress kicks in. It's like, do I tell them I can't make it, but I might lose the job, and then I might not get that other job, and then you're stuck between that because you don't have control over your time. Sociologically, right, and I'm a sociologist, so I always go back to the main sociological theories. There's these 4 big meta-theories that we look at social interaction in society and organization. And the first is individualism. And this is as an individual. And this is an important element because this is what empowers us as people, right? What can you, for yourself, do to make your life better? What can you do to make people, make life better for people in your life, small group interactions? So this is an important element. But there's also culturalism, and that's our values and our belief systems. And when it comes to time, we have values and we have beliefs that are informed by the group, whether it's a small group or a large group or the society itself. And then we also have structuralism, which is the big social institutions that operate. And right now with our Trump, President-elect Trump, right, you're hearing a lot of rhetoric coming saying, you know, there's not going to be a whole lot of change as long as we protect our social institutions, right? That, you know, American society, I don't know if you heard that analogy, we're not a speedboat, we're an ocean liner. Can't make a quick little U-turn, right? It's going to take a long time to turn that boat. And that's because of our institutions that we have. Our institutions is a structured way that things get done. We have family, it's our social institutions. We have schools, those are also social institutions. We have a political institution, who's our leader, even though Hillary got all the votes, right? She got the majority vote, but that's not how our institution operates. She did not get the electoral vote that she needed to win. So Trump is our president no matter what. And we could, you know, pray for a miracle and all of that, but the reality is that's probably not going to happen because we have a political system that's in place. And if we disrupt that political system, we might disrupt the whole society. And we've seen other societies that get disrupted, right? Where their institutions fall apart, the society falls apart. And we see those things happening. And then we also have how our economic system works. So what I wanted to do was study time in terms of the social structures that are in place. It doesn't mean that some crazy things just always happen and you have no control over it. That's fatalism. So as a sociologist, we recognize that sometimes there's just something crazy in the mix that happens that nobody's in control of, life chances, unexpected, unplanned, that nobody does control. So, you know, with time, that's always things, you know. You're on your way to work, you're gonna be on time, and a tire blows, right? Well, you know, there's only certain kinds of elements that we can look at. You don't know when that tire is gonna blow, that's fatalism. But if you have bald tires and you knew that you were supposed to change your tires, that's individualism, right? If you believe that you should use your tires until they blow, because why waste and change a tire that hasn't blown yet, that's cultural beliefs. The structure is where do we go to get the damn tire? Excuse my language. I was working on that all semester, but I still came out, sorry. But where do you go to get your tire, right? And what systems are in place? Now, when I was in California, it was very easy. There was a tire place on every corner. You call AAA, they were there like in 5 minutes, and they changed the tire for you and told you where to go to get a new tire, and you did it. The first time I had a big tire blowout here, it took like 45 minutes for AAA to come, and then the guy says, oh, I can get you a new tire. And I said, really? I said, okay, let's do it. He's like, yeah, it'll only be like, $50. I'm like, are you sure? Because my tires, they cost me like $300, but that was in California, right? And he's like, yeah, no problem, it'll take like 5 minutes. Well, an hour and a half later, he comes with a tire, right? That's a used tire, it wasn't a new tire, and it didn't match the other 3 tires, right? but you know, it's okay, it's a tire, and it worked, and you put it in there. So the institutions that are operating, where do I get a tire? Well, there were no places here. The Tice was closed, right? And I think he was the one that did it, but he called somebody to open up the place to get the used tire and put it on there. So that was an in, right? Otherwise I'd be stuck on the side of the road. So the structure is, what kind of systems do we have in place in which to get your tires and where to get it? And that was, you know, 6, 7 years ago. I think today there's better places now around local to get tires. But where you're at and the structures that are in place are going to affect it. When it comes to time, how do we start looking at that? Well, we might want to look at it in terms of control. Who has control over the time? Well, it started with our knowledge base. The lunar calendar, the solar calendar. Once we had that knowledge of how time works with the sun and the moon, that started to increase the kind of control that we would have. The devices, the technological devices that we developed, clocks, right? The sundial first, and then our clocks, analog, and now digital. Now we have what, the satellite, you know, my phone is always right. I didn't have to worry about, you know, missing time when time changed, right? My phone automatically updated. The only thing that didn't was my microwave, right? And then I had to pull out the paper and figure out how to do it because we want to know the proper time. We have this knowledge base that we want to control that time, we want to have it in place. Defining time frames became part of our language. So morning, noon, afternoon, evening, that language developed because we had a sense of time. Our work time, you know, is it a paid lunch, right? There used to be 9 to 5, and it included a paid lunch. You got paid during your lunchtime. You had lunch, everybody had lunch, and sometimes we went off, sometimes we stayed here, but we all got together, we all had that hour off, and it was paid. We saw a switch in our time from 9 to 5 to 8 to 5. And so you still got your lunch, it just wasn't paid, right? And if you didn't want to take it, that's your business, right? That's your time to run your errands or do what you want. You can have control over that time. But in reality, you lost an hour of time that used to be paid time that's no longer paid time. We see shift work emerging. There's always been shift work. We've always had the guy on the fence watching, right? You know, way back in barbarian times when we had our land, somebody stayed up all night to make sure the people were safe. So we always had that, you know, who's working the swing shift, who's working first shift, second shift, third shift, and we still see that happening today. School time, study time, we used to have where school time was your study time, and when you were done with school, you know, you were done, right? I never did homework until I went to college. I didn't have to study. That wasn't part of it. After school, we did cheerleading, we did tennis, we did fundraisers, we did Girl Scouts, we had all these different activities that we did. Today's kids are expected to study when they get home. Right? The study time changed. So now you have less control over your time, but that study time is part of that precariousness. You get to decide how you're going to spend your study time, do it or not do it. That's a personal decision. But if you don't do it, there's consequences. So how much control do you really have, right? Leisure time. What is that again? Right. What is leisure? Leisure is doing stuff that you enjoy. Time to do things that you enjoy. I had a friend of mine ask me, so Lydia, what do you do for yourself? I said, what do you mean? She said, well, what do you do for yourself? Because you're doing all these things, but it seems like it's either for your family, for your work, for your students, or for the house, for your household. But what are you doing for yourself? I'm like, I don't know. She's like, well, you need to figure out what you like to do. I'm like, I don't know what I like, right? And I start crying, I don't know, right? Leisure time is important, but why is it important, right? Why is it important to have leisure time? And that's what I've been spending. Okay, what do I like to do? Well, I have some hobbies. They're in boxes and bins that are all half done, right? I started a blanket, I started a dress, I halfway crocheted a hat, halfway crocheted a blanket, but none of them were done because I didn't have enough time, right? But maybe because I wasn't dedicated. I don't know, right? But leisure time is that idea, what do you like to do? Family time, spending time with your family. More and more we're hearing this family time as being important. So work-life balance is about managing your time so that you can spend time with family, have some leisure time, and then have some discretionary time. That is time where you can decide to do whatever it is you want, whether you spend it with leisure or whether you take a nap or you read a good book, curl up with your dog, whatever it is that you want to do, but you have that discretionary time to do yoga. I think you were mentioning that the other day, right? Are we going to have time to do yoga before final exams? I said, absolutely. You know, I'm lying, right? Because at the same time, I want you to do certain things and finish them up, and I put these demands on my students, and our employers do the same thing to us as employees. They put demands. So you can decide how to spend your time, but get all of these things done. So I position time in terms of what's called neoliberal capitalism. So I applaud you guys for showing up, because that's a really scary sounding phrase. Neoliberal capitalism. What the hell does that mean, right? What is that? So I want to break that down in terms of what that term neoliberalism means. And really it starts out with this dichotomy of liberalism and conservatism. Those are terms that we've heard about, but maybe we don't exactly know what they mean. So I don't know, you guys real familiar with those terms? Good. So quick review. It's kind of a dichotomy where there's this continuum, and at the two far ends you have liberalism that's on one end, conservatism on the other. You might have heard this in terms of the far left and the far right. And those are just, you know, where do we put them on the continuum? Well, in reality, you can put this continuum either way. But when we say the far left, we typically mean liberals. When we say the far right, we mean conservatives. The far left, they focus on this idea of liberty, freedom. People should be free. People should have access to resources in an equitable manner. So the liberals are always fighting for liberty and equality. And they want this idea that we should be free and we should have what we need to live our lives. The conservatives are most concerned with tradition, how we have done things. So the culture becomes really important. And capitalism itself was in the tradition of, and we talked about this in Environmental Club, the Protestant work ethic. So capitalism, at least according to our great sociologist, Max Weber, right, that capitalism emerged almost simultaneously with the spread and distribution of Protestantism. So we had this major schism between Catholicism and Catholicism and Protestantism. And this Protestant ideology that spread out went hand in hand with capitalism. Because the Protestant ethic kind of had embedded in it that some of us were chosen and some of us weren't chosen. And the chosen people we will know because they will be successful. They will reap the benefits that this earth has to offer. But they don't exploit them. There's a strong ethic that's involved in that. So the tradition of the far right is very religious, and they go back to kind of religious ideology, and they look at the idea of private ownership and personal responsibility as being really important. The liberals believe that we should have public ownership and civic responsibilities, that we're responsible to each other. With Protestantism and the conservative movement, personal responsibility is how you live your life is how you will be judged in the afterlife. So if you don't live your life properly, you yourself are going to stand by yourself in front of God, and God will judge you. Right? And that's a fundamental belief of this conservative movement. And, you know, these are the two extremes. In reality, most people are somewhere in between. I mean, that's really where we have elements of this that we believe and elements of that, but these are the two extremes. So where does neoliberalism come in? This is that idea of kind of taking the best of liberalism and the best of conservatism and creating a freedom that really ends up being oppressive for the masses. And that's really this idea of moving from private ownership and control of social structures that were once publicly owned. So we see this happening with our prisons. The prisons are more and more becoming private institutions that are focused on this idea of we can make a profit and be efficient and run these prisons. Of course, they exist because they're there to make money, right? Newspapers exist to make money, not just to inform us, right? And if a newspaper doesn't make money, it goes out of business. Prisons will be the same thing. We're seeing it happening with schools. So we see more and more, I think it hit more the higher education, because most institutions, if they were private institutions, they were considered nonprofit. But when they moved to the profit institutions, schools said, you know what, we could do this better and more efficient and make money for people and still provide a service that that institution can do. We see it with our roads and highways. I don't see it out here as much, but in California, if you want to go from LA to Orange County, they have a really nice private straightaway toll road, but it's privately owned. They bought all the land, they put a road, and you pay money, and you can get from one side of town to the other side really quick and easy. And you rarely will get a ticket, right? They even have like a little inn in there that you can break the speed limit a little bit, and it's really rare to get caught. Where if you're on the public road and you're speeding, you're likely to get caught. But you're probably not going to be speeding because it's bumper to bumper traffic, right? You're just sitting there moving one little step at a time thinking, for a long time I didn't want to use those private roads because I was fundamentally against that idea, right? But then I was late for a meeting, I didn't leave on time, right? It's like, well, all right, I'll pay my $4 to drive that road, right? And so we're seeing more and more this neoliberalism where we're moving from institutions that once were privately owned now being, publicly owned. The city owned it, the public library, the post office. So even the post office is competing with UPS, what's that other one? DSL, FedEx. And they're people that are saying, well, we like what the post office does, but we could do a better job and make money at it, right? And that's what suddenly the post office had to compete with. Now, are they good at that? Well, I don't know. I went 2 days before Christmas, mailed a package, and I didn't want to pay the extra money. I said they can get it after Christmas, doesn't matter. They got it on Christmas Eve because they were in a competitive mode. Why? Because they got a new head of the post office, postmaster, that said, we're a business. We are now in business. We're not a bureaucracy, we're a business, and we're going to run this institution like a business. And so we're seeing this kind of focusing on profits. And in fact, when you hear the postmaster talk, and you listen to some of his speeches, he talks about how we need to make money. It's like, you're a public institution, you're not supposed to be making money, right? But his idea is we need to be not just not breaking even, right, which is what sustainability is about. So you've heard those phrases, sustainability. We usually think of it in the environmental movement, but in the economic movement, sustainability is antithetical to capitalism, because capitalism is about making a profit. And so when we start looking at this neoliberalism and we start connecting it with capitalism, I just want to quickly remind you what capitalism is. I saw this whole series of cows, and if you really want to understand economics systems, Google capitalism and cows, and you're going to get these whole series of capitalism little memes, I guess they call it. But traditional capitalism, you have 2 cows, you sell 1 cow and buy a bull, your herd multiplies, you sell them, and you retire on the profits. So the whole idea is, what can we do to make more money than what we have? Right? And I was rolling laughing so hard it hurt going through all of them, because they go through every nation on how capitalism operates. They got to America, right? You have 2 cows, you sell 1 and force the remaining cow to produce the milk of 4 cows. Right? Later, you hire a consultant to analyze why did the cow die. So this is kind of where, I know, but in some sense, that has been happening to the average person. They've been asked to do more and more work and use up more and more of their time. And I've talked with managers in places like Walmart and Dollar Store and things like that, and they'll say, we're not allowed to have our employees have overtime, but they can't leave until they finish stocking these shelves, right? And so you're putting the employee's like, well, I'm supposed to get off at 5. Well, you need to check out. You're not allowed to do overtime. Did you get your work done? Right? And so then you're in this schizophrenic element, right? How do I get things done? How do I get it done? Well, I'll clock out and then I'll get it done so I don't lose my job, and then I'll go. And they're spending more time at work than they're actually getting paid for, right? And so we saw a lot of that happening, not just in the Walmart, but we have it everywhere. Teachers, right? Teachers have more and more students. You have a variety of different industries that, you know, came up with this term multitasking, right? You heard that phrase, right? So in the past, you had the one person who sat and answered the phone, and that was their job. But now you not just answer the phone, you also got to greet the customers. And you have to greet them after they step in the door 3 steps, and you need to smile, look them in the eye, and say hello, right? If the phone rings, pick up the phone, right? And so we see this like conflict happening between what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it. Very equivalent to the fact of when the lady drops dead from not being able to do everything that they keep piling on top of her, then we get a consultant in, and the consultant's making a lot of money, right? To tell us how to work things out. Have you heard of venture capitalism? Right? This just is crazy. But you have 2 cows, you sell 3. Right? We don't even have 3. We sold 3 to your publicly listed company using letters of credit opened by your brother-in-law at the bank. You then execute a debt equity swap with an associate general offer, so you get all 4 cows back with a tax exemption for 5 cows. And I was just rolling with it. The milk rights of the 6 cows are transferred via the intermediary of a Cayman Islands company secretly owned by the majority shareholder who sells the rights of all 7 cows back to the listed company. The annual report says the company owes 8 cows with an option of 1 more. So that's what happened with our housing market bubble, okay? So people, you know, basically we've changed our ethic when it comes to neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is a different kind of ethic that operated when conservatives were operating. Conservatives, they had a strong ethic, and it was not just a work ethic, but it was an ethic of treating people fairly, of doing what you think is right, following a guideline that was laid out for them in terms of how capitalism should operate. When we start looking at this change in values and beliefs, we're going to culture. So the venture capitalism also tied into this fact that we're not alone anymore. Technologies have changed to the point where we could be on the other side of the world instantly. We could pick up a phone and call anybody pretty much anywhere. We could be there almost instantly, not instantly, but hopefully someday we'll get that little transporter, right? We're aiming for that kind of technology if our students will study engineering, technology, math, and engineering, right? Or STEM, I got those out of order. But when we start looking about it, we see this culture of lying, cheating, stealing, and when that doesn't work, murder. So when the housing bubble popped, when we saw the fraud that was happening in the banking industry, there were a lot of people who mysteriously ended up supposedly committing suicide. Right? So we know that there's some crazy stuff going out there, which is the concern that a lot of people have with our new president, our president-elect. He plays the game within venture capitalism on his business-wise, which is okay, you know, because the goal is making smart decisions, right? This culture of you're doing the smart thing that allows you to make a profit. And so we reconstructed what smart means outside of an ethic. The ethic is now is, are you making money or are you not? Are you successful or are you not successful? And so that kind of is that neoliberal capitalism that operates on the bottom line. Are you showing a profit or are you not showing a profit? Right? And we do it across the board, not just in our capitalist industries, but even in our nonprofit industries, like schools, like our post office, our roads, all of those things are happening. All right, so I know, neoliberal capitalism, politics of time, how does that operate? And where does time poverty come in? Right? So we know economic poverty just means that you don't have enough money to, you know, sustain your life. But what about poverty, time poverty? This was first identified in the 1970s. It was this idea that time is a resource that is disproportionately affecting households. In other words, there are some people that have households that have multiple adults, and they can get everything that needs to be done for the household, versus those households that don't. They might only have one adult in the house, and that adult is overburdened with household production things. And you know, what are those things? Cleaning, laundry, right? I was doing laundry yesterday in between doing everything, right? Cooking, preparing food, shopping for the food, that's the nightmare, right? Trying to go and get what you need. If you have small kids, right, that's study time. That's part of the household production, right? So we're looking at now this identifying time as a resource. By 2011, time poor started to be recognized, and this was looking at time poor as individuals that don't have enough discretionary time to engage in activities that improve their overall well-being. And so, and that includes leisure and education. Education is something that improves the overall well-being of people. What are those kinds of activities? And we listed those. A clean home, right? The home that I keep is pretty clean, but it used to be with a stay-at-home mom when I was growing up, it was cleaned every day, right? Every day that was the job. Get up, clean, wipe, sweep, vacuum, straighten all of those things out. Why? Because that's what made a healthy life. Preparing healthy foods is very different from preparing unhealthy foods. So if we buy prepared foods that have preservatives and those kinds of things, we know that that's not healthy for us. And yet there's time, not just money, because it's also money in terms of the resources that it takes to buy food, but we know that it takes time to prepare healthy foods. If you're going to buy a broccoli, you got to clean it, right? You can buy the prepared broccoli that's already prepared, but you don't really know how it's prepared. And so we go to frozen foods and things like that in my household, only because getting from the farmer's market, you got, you know, bugs and things like that you got to clean and prepare and still kind of manage. Hopefully there's bugs, that means they're not using pesticides. If there's no bugs, they're probably using pesticides, probably not all that healthy. Exercising and healthy activities, again, that takes time. How much time do we dedicate? We know that we're supposed to be working out at least, 4 times a week, an hour a day? That's the new standard, I believe, something like that. It used to be like half an hour, 3 times a week, but that obviously didn't work for us. We need more time to do that. But in order to exercise, we need to have resources to do that. Now, I know here at our campus, we have our little exercise room. I think I used it once. Ideally, it sounds like a good idea, but to find the time to go down there and use it. And we talked in our class about, you know, connecting with the YMCA, which is just next door, but that's both time and money to go over there. Not an easy task. Improve an overall intellect, reading, writing, sharing stories and experience. That improves our well-being, and we know that these kinds of things of connecting with individuals, connecting with ourselves are important because we know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How many of you guys have heard of this? Yeah, all the psych people should know. If you don't know, look them up, because this is classic stuff that nobody disputes. Nobody disputes that to become the best person that you can be, that self-actualized individual, we first have to make sure that our psychological needs are met. We need to make sure that our physiological needs, our food, our water, they put breathing in this one, right? So we need clean air as well. And what was that movie where air was a commodity? I forgot what movie that was. I think Schwarzenegger was in it a long time ago. He was on Mars, right? But air was a commodity, right? We take air for granted, but we used to think that water was a free thing, and water is a commodity now. Food, water, shelter, sleep, those are the basic necessities just to maintain the physical body. And then we need safety and security. Love and belonging is important to the individual. We know that self-esteem is important. That is confidence in yourself. Achievements means accomplishing things. And then our self-actualization, that's our intellectual needs, right? Our morality, our creativity, spontaneity, acceptance, experience, purpose, meaning, inner potential. So if we want to really move to a society where we are the best person that we can be, we need time. People who are only meeting the basic necessities are what we call people who are living in time poverty. If you're not able to move beyond that, because all of your time is involved in work, maintaining your family, making sure that everybody in your family has food, water, shelter, clothing, right? Shopping for clothes, that's a nightmare. And not always easy to do. You spend hours on the internet doing it, right? Not much if you, even more if you go to a mall and shop and walk around. So if you're spending your time only on these things, you're not going to be able to have time to become that self-actualized individual, which is, we know to some extent is where we want to achieve in our lives. So the politics of time, we moved to this 24-hour model. And that model, we have 24 hours, 7 days a week. The reality is we don't have that much time. So we started this with some quotes that we all have the same 24 hours, but how much time do you need to sleep? It's not exactly the same for everybody, but on average it's about 8 hours. So 8 hours our day is automatically is already taken out, so we don't have that 24 hours. How much time do you spend eating or preparing foods so that you can eat, right? Or going to get it. Thank you, Dr. Jack, he was here, he left. But when he got me a sandwich today, because I didn't have time to go and get it, right? So, you know, getting that food and eating it, and I had time to eat half when the half after class, right? But that takes time. Cleaning yourself and your local environment, that takes time. Communicating, interactions with people is important. That's what makes us people. That's part of the nature of humans. And so we have this 24-hour model that makes us all believe that, yes, we all have the same amount of time, but in reality, how much control do you have 24/7? So when we start looking at where is my time dedicated and who's controlling those times and how, so when my friend asked me, what time do you have for yourself? And I started laying out where I'm spending all my time. I realized I don't have that discretionary time that allows me just to do what I want when I want. But we can always go back to this element of individualism, right? And that's where empowerment comes from. Empowerment comes from understanding the structures that are there that are controlling your time. It's understanding the belief system that we have, that yes, there's certain beliefs that, you can manage your time, a certain element, and have control over certain aspects, and knowing when you have control and when you don't have control is part of a value system. And understanding that, stuff happens in life. I did good, didn't I? I said stuff. Stuff happens in life, and we have to just acknowledge that, yes, those things are there. So when it starts to construct time, we need to make sure that we have some leeway there. These are the kind of, I always like looking at the new quotes that are out there. These are quotes that, really come from a neoliberal capitalist mentality. It's the idea that never do tomorrow what you can do today. Procrastination is the thief of time. Which in one way, on an individual level, we all procrastinate on things. But the idea that you're not being as productive as possible, it's going back to that mentality of one cow producing the milk of 4 cows, right? Rather than sometimes when I'm staring at a blank screen and I was supposed to be writing for this last 2 hours, I did it yesterday. I stared at the blank PowerPoint for I don't know how long, thinking, what am I going to put in my PowerPoints, right? Because my paper is just like, well, I'll send you the paper if you want, you could put on that sign-in sheet if you want a copy of the paper, and I'll send it over to you. But how do you break this idea down into presentation, right? So, of course, that's why I did laundry, right? So I stared at the screen for half an hour, and then I thought, oh, I need to do laundry, right? And so I jumped and sorted the laundry, and then I got an idea, and I ran down, and I started typing up my ideas and doing things, and then I remembered, oh my gosh, someone's going to come home, they're going to find the laundry and all these piles all over the house, and that's going to be a disaster because it's going to start a fight, right? Because there's people in my life that don't like that. So then I ran up and I got those and started putting them where they needed to be, right? So, there's this idea that time is a thief, but there might be other things that's in our lives that's really thieving that time. This quote, "I don't have time," is the grown-up version of the dog ate my homework. Right? And we see a lot of people utilizing that phrase. I went to I don't know how many seminars that said, you know, you're tenure track, so you need to learn to say no. When people ask you to do things, say no. Learn to say no, right? And so this idea of I don't have enough time is that fight that we have. That's what we have in our pocket to say, no, I don't do that. No, I can't do that. No, I won't do that. I need to do something different. But in reality, we have to practice things out and balance those out. But this version, this idea, I don't have time, right? If someone says, oh, you don't have time, well, that's just you saying you don't want to do it, or you're not going to do it. Take ownership of that, right? And this is basically telling people you can produce the milk of 4 cows, right? That's what this is kind of saying, kind of a subtext. Personally, I love mornings without an alarm. That's the fun day, the day we determine that we are not getting up out of bed. You guys all better turn off your phone, and that's of course when the cat starts meowing at the door because he's confused. Where is everybody? It's like, shut up! But those are rare. It's rare to have a day where you're not dictated by a technological device telling you where to go, where to be, and what to do. Remember, even in your worst days, we only have 24 hours. I like that one. That gets me through a lot. So as you're sitting there waiting for a car to come to get your tire fixed, right? You just remember, you know, okay, today's shot. We're just going to go with it, and we'll start fresh tomorrow. And that is the nice thing about time. Our time is our most valuable asset. We must protect it, invest it, and maximize it to its full potential. But it's up to us, I think, as individuals to determine who deserves our time and where do we spend it. And so, you know, we can take this and be a victim of that from this kind of neoliberal capitalism that operates in our society, or we can take it from an individual perspective and saying, you know what, this is my time, and it's going to be in my best interest to look for another job, because this job is crappy, and if I lose that job, I will just spend 24/7 then looking for a new job, right? And that fear that we have in neoliberal capitalism is something that's real. And I hope that we're probably, this is my prediction, I don't know, with this, you know, we're in a divided nation now. We've got people that voted for Hillary, they got the popular vote. We got, you know, almost, I mean, really, we've got 300 million people, right? And a million difference really isn't a whole lot. I mean, you have people that want to try something different with Trump. Trump is very much coming from the neoliberal capitalist mentality. I think Obama in his press release or address that he did on Monday said the good thing about Trump is he's practical, he's pragmatic, that's the word he used. He's pragmatic. He just wants to get the job done. Now, what job he wants to get done? Draining a swamp. We listened to 5 hours of a commentary of what that could possibly mean. The articulation of that isn't there. But that's where we as individuals need to know where we can spend our time. And that is getting the ear of Trump, activism, spending some time, I think, thinking about what do we want, what kinds of changes. Our education system, yes, needs reform. Our healthcare system, it needs reform. Our daily ways that time is taken from us is up for debate. And if we, you know, stop and reflect and think about, you know, where do we want to invest that? I think activism is really going to be the key in the next 4 years so that people can say, this is what I think is important. There's a women's march that's happening January 21st, the day after, day 1 of Trump administration. And it's a time to say, hey, you know, you talked a lot of stuff. A lot of people not sure what you mean by all that. But these are the things that we think are important, and people are coming out, and I think so far there's like 35,000 people that are planning to go, and another 134,000 that said maybe, and that was just within, what, a week and a half? We're almost at 2 weeks now? 2 weeks of the Trump administration, right? So those are like incredible numbers, and I think that the more that we can think about putting this idea of time as important, and thinking, where do we want to spend our time? What do we want from our kids? What's going to be effective for our kids? you know, those are things that we as individuals reflect on, we can have a big say. It's all about time. So, thank you for coming, I appreciate it. Any questions or comments? It's all time, huh? All right, thank you, guys.
If you came in late, if you wanted to fill a evaluation form, they're on the table. Again, they're not to evaluate Dr. Rose, they're evaluate the speaker series process, so, but they're allowed to put comments, positive comments, of course.
Yeah, positive ones, because I don't want to be like in bed crying on me. No, I'm just kidding.
I think those boxes, buddy. I think it's good. No, it's just nice skirt.
This is yours too.
Yeah, that's
It's not a
one.
big golden one.
Forget
Yeah,
it.
it's Joe.
Who's this, the binder?
They're coming back.
Oh.
I need to get rid of everything.
Your phone? Your
Yeah.
phone, what?
Yeah.
No.
Not here.
Oh, yeah, oh, not